I'd like to talk about the alternating bass and the approach to playing with your thumb in fingerpicking guitar. I cover this in my Fingerpicking Book 1 from Detroit Folk Workshop, and there's a link to that book if you're interested. The way I approach fingerpicking in general is kind of by lead sheet form or concept, which would be just melody and chords. I've never really been able to do note for note renditions of any style of music ever since I was a kid, and the best way for me to assimilate a song is to just do my own arrangement. Even if it's close to another arrangement, I just need to hear it and understand the harmony and then put the melody against the harmony. Transcribing is always best. I talk about tab as something I don't particularly like, mainly because I can't visualize the fingerboard with tab. If tab works for you, by all means, use it. It's fine. The way I think about playing generally is that, if you're going to perform something, it should be memorized. Or if you really want to dig in and go deep with a song, it should be memorized. So however you get there is kind of up to you, and any way you do it is fine. The way that I think about the right hand, and I cover this in the appendix of my book, and I'll post a PDF to that as well if you follow this over to my website. And if you're on the website, it's down there. If you think about how chords work in general, like when you first learned how to strum chords, you basically learned how to just, see a chord and strum it, like that. And so if you were playing a song, it went from C to G, you would just strum, say a measure of C to a measure of G or G7. Maybe back to C. And maybe you get a slash chord or something like that, but typically you wouldn't have that. You just would have the symbol C. And you wouldn't really question that approach, and even in the beginning, you see the C, you know how long you need to strum it in a basic way. If you saw the notes all written out, it would look kind of strange, really. It's rare that you would see that as a strum. Now you might see a strum pattern written out, say something like this. That's like a measure, and that would be something you'd apply to all the chords. Again, you maybe would have to look at it once as a rhythm written out, but you wouldn't have to see it every single time. You'd know. So what I'm kind of getting at is you can approach the thumb in fingerpicking the exact same way. You don't really have to see it in order to understand what to do. If you think about the cage system, and if you don't know how the cage system works, essentially you have 3 root positions. You have a 6th string, a 5th string, and a 4th string. You actually have 2 6th string, 2 5th string, and a 4th string. Now when I fingerpick, I don't typically think in terms of the 4th string, because that's the D position. Oops. And that would be your bass on the 4th string. If I'm in the key of D, I would probably just drop my 6th string down, and all of a sudden my D chord would become, a 6th string root chord, because that 6th string would go down to D. When I play, say, in G or an A, where the D is there, I'm going to invert it typically, and instead of playing like the bass or the root on the 4th string, I'm going to put the bass on the 6th string, invert it, and it won't be the root, it would be the 3rd. So the D would be D/F sharp. Or D7/F sharp. If you had a minor chord, you go down to the F natural. Okay, so then you have a 6th string root chord when it comes to the D. It's just a slash chord, and so you've got only 6th string root and 5th string root really to worry about. And this is just basic, when you play up the neck and stuff, you do inversions, you need to play 4th string root chords, but I try to just stay away from them as much as I can. That's just me. And so we've got a 5th string root to think about, so like a C chord, or a minor or an A chord, and so B7. Those are all 5th string root chords. 6th string root chords would be a G, or a G7, any type, an F, whether you play it like this or you do a full bar. or an E or E minor. Now, if you were to do like a bass strum as an actual strummer, you might just hit the base of the note, like in a case of a G chord, maybe just the 6th string, and then strum. And then maybe you'd play like a C chord, you'd strum from 5. Okay, so that's a way of kind of just keeping track of maybe something a little bit more than just the basic strum. You just have a bass strum. So you're using your thumb, or if you had a flat pick, and then you just strum down after that. Now you could do more than one bass, so you could alternate. That's a C chord, and what I'm doing there is I'm going from 5 to 4. If I was going to do, say, a 6-string root chord, a G chord, I could go from 6 to 4. So whether you use a flat pick, thumb pick, or no picks, that's just kind of what you would be doing. Now, if you think about just that as a concept, you wouldn't necessarily have to see that. You'd get used to what you were going to be doing with the chord or chords based on whether it was a 6-string root or 5th string root. And that's kind of what I'm getting at with the finger picking or the thumb. When I look at a melody, and the chord against it, I'm focusing on where I can get that melody against whatever chord I need. So maybe I could play C down here, or I have to play C up the neck, something like that. But as far as the right hand's concerned, if it's a 5th string root chord, the very basic way that you're going to play the thumb is going to be going from 5 to 4 on a 5th string root chord. So a C, you'd go 5 and then 4, and then if you think of that as 2 beats, you would do it twice in a measure, and that's all you have to do for a C chord. If it was, say, a G chord, the very basic way to do that is a 6 to 4 bass movement. So thumb. So if you see a C and then a melody, you got to figure out where to put that melody against the bass, but you don't need to see that bass line necessarily down below. Again, if you're going to be playing an arrangement that somebody did that has a lot of movement in the bass or counterpoint and things like that, then you might need to see that, of course. But the vast majority, especially if you're getting started in the style, the thumb is the basic movement between those 2 notes, depending on the string. You could go a little bit beyond that and say do like a 5-4-6-4 on a 5th string root. You'd have to move a little bit on a C chord. And then a G would be 6-4-5-4. And I would call that maybe like a more advanced way of playing the same basic idea. And instead of just thinking of 2 notes in the pattern, you would think of 4. When I'm playing, I typically just, I don't necessarily think about what basses I'm doing. If I have room to do more with the bass, I will, just kind of naturally to fill up the space. If not, I won't. And the more familiar I get with a tune, the more I can usually do. So the idea is really just to kind of have a basic approach. Going from a lead sheet, just to talk about it basically, that's like I said, the foundation of the style that I teach in my fingerpicking book 1. It's also the way that I approach basically everything, because then you're thinking of melody and harmony all the time. And when you play fingerpicking guitar, and we're talking about like, traditional like Americana or American whatever style, early blues or early old time country, even the early jazz and pop, like some of the guys that played in Girls, took that style beyond those basics, but that's where it kind of comes from, and you're just going like a blues. Something like that. You're really playing the melody on the top 3 strings, and sometimes you have to go to 4. I mean, there's no rules really, but it's just a basic approach. So if you think in that way, you really only need to learn to know how to read on the top 3 strings a bit, and then how to put chords to those notes. And on the guitar, even though there's all these things that you can do, it's a grid, so you can, it can get confusing for people. But once you commit to the way it's laid out, position theory in the left hand, you start to realize that really the only new information that you have note-wise happens on the 1st string after you play the 3rd fret. So as you go from G here to A, everything else is going to be new, and you can't really get that information any lower than the note that you're playing on the lower string. So if you play A here, you can get it elsewhere. You could get A here, so that's up the neck, but you can't get it anywhere lower. So as you go up, that's kind of how I think, can I get it on the first string or the second string? And then anything else is just a chord shape, and you're playing these two basses. I know it's kind of, a lot to digest, and I'm talking about these other concepts kind of briefly, but I lay it all out in the book, and it's, I think, a good way to think because it takes down a lot of the information that intimidates students, especially when they look at an arrangement with two parts, stems going up, stems going down, and, it's hard to process information. It's beneficial to have basses in there because then you can kind of see where the melody's at, the syncopations and things like that against the bass, because you're usually just typically dealing with eighth notes, either on the beat or off the beat, syncopating. But even then, after you get used to it, you don't really think about it. The thumb kind of drives everything. I always talk about students to students in the beginning that the right hand is often overlooked, especially for beginners, as important as it is. Students always focus on the left hand, but without the right hand, you're not going to execute anything. A lot of your tone and your feel, your phrasing, all that stuff comes from your right hand. It's more or less equal, but the right hand really, if it doesn't do its job, the left hand isn't going to really be able to do anything either. So when it comes to playing even in the fingerpicking style, like keeping that thumb going and keeping that bass going without really having to think about it, just as like a machine, it's going to really propel everything else. So I hope this makes sense. I think of it, I didn't really say it in the beginning. I'm having trouble getting these videos down, so I just have to kind of do them in one take. But the way I think about thumb picking is kind of the same way I think about strumming. It's just a way to do something with the chord with your right hand. It just so happens that when you finger pick, you got to do stuff with your fingers as well, and you have to know a lot of chords. So I hope that if you're interested in this, you'll take a look at my book. You can get it on my website, nickschillace.com. You can contact me there, or on YouTube, or find me wherever, Facebook, Instagram, that kind of thing. And if you want lessons, you can hit me up via Skype. If you're in the Detroit area, I teach at my house and I teach out of my school, Orion Music Studio. So if this is helpful, drop me a line and let me know. Thanks.